I was about 12 years old when one of my sisters showed me this band that I'd never heard of at the time. I'm the youngest in my family, and I had sort of grown up a little bit with my dad, but not exactly in the super developing stages, right? So I was interested to see what this whole band was about. And obviously, if you can't tell on this whole channel, I've been a bit of a nerd for my entire life, but music came last for whatever reason. Before this, I was still super interested in the history of video games and movies and TV shows, but never music. At least not until Gorillaz came into my life.
I'm feeling glad I got sunshine in a bag. I'm useless, but not for long. The future is coming on.
Now, as I've grown up more and more, I've listened to much more music, and obviously I've gained a new vision towards the entire art form. But going all the way back to this album, I've tried to gain a whole new lens on it. At one point, I was literally only listening to Gorillaz and nothing else. It was all of the audio that I consumed. And honestly, phase one is still pretty weird, I think. You know, going from mood to mood, phase to phase, it's kind of like a mystery course meat of music. Gorillaz to me is much more than a brand or a band. You know, the real fun of the project is to be inundated within the world presented. You know, through the lights and the sounds, you're able to gain a sort of sight, a vision into a completely different world. You know, the hatred of celebrity, the degeneracy, the ignorance that phase one takes place in. It's an abandoned cityscape with just endless cosmic horrors walking by, and yet people ignore all of them and they just fulfill their parental desires of lust and gluttony. I was only about 12 years old when I started this journey, but now I want to come back at the age of 18 and try to gain a new sight into this album, because this is not just the beginning of Gorillaz. This is not just phase one. This is Celebrity Takedown.
I used to resent this song a bit, but now I've appreciated for what it truly is. My first listens, it sounded like they took a great opening track and spoiled it with a random diffusion into mushy noises. Really, it was on me to hear that beginning guitar strumming and expect only what I wanted from the track. But also, I've recently started to enjoy everything past the chorus more instead of just tolerating it. You know, maybe you could call that Stockholm Syndrome, but there is a loose feeling of simple fun excluded throughout this entire track. You can tell Damon and the entire crew really had a ton of fun making it. You know, the wackier elements do truly bring something onto this track that could really just be drivel, who knows. Lyrically, I really love this one. You know, I thought it was a really cool intro, and I always thought of it as some old rundown corner store getting robbed. Meanwhile, the overhead radio is just playing this like uncharacteristically inappropriate music. It's a pretty perfect vignette for, you know, a huge city overflowing with crime. June 6, 1966. A rainy day in Britain, because of course it was, it's fucking Britain. A small baby is delivered onto the doorstep of a notorious booze-cruising, womanizing gambler named Sebastian Nichols. After unwrapping his unwanted gift, he sent to a glue factory through the post. He decided to keep the child, just as he was forced to with many others. But his fatherly love would be superseded by his habitual love of abuse, alcohol, and abusing alcohol, which would only reflect on each of them reluctantly adopted children. However, Murdoc would be different because he managed to gain a single baccalaureate in antisocial anthropology. But just before leaving school, he gained a new insight into his future career after being pushed around by bully Tony Chopper and devoted himself towards his love of music, gained by his jailbird brother's fusion of metal and dub, and a little help from Satan himself. He bounced from useless job to useless job and shitty garbage band to shitty garbage band, hoping and blaspheming that he'll score big one of these times, eventually becoming impatient, even following many years of attempting to follow his deal with the devil. He had no luck. So to push his needle of success, he'd rob a store, Uncle Norm's Organ Emporium. Originally attempted to drive through the door, steal the requested keyboards, and be on his merry way. But he'd end up driving straight into a local thick-headed piano salesman, Stuart Pott's eye, giving him an 8-ball fracture and complimentary coma to come with, which Murdoc just found absolutely hilarious, to the point that whenever the police arrived, he was still writhing on the ground in giggles, resulting in a sentence of 30,000 hours of community service and caring after the blue corn, which, of course, ended up in a high-speed collision, which thankfully resulted in full recovery, the coma, and a full 8-ball fracture on the opposite eye. But once he stood up, apparently he gained exactly what he was looking for. Not pianos, but instead a pianist, which gave him an idea: to steal his bandmates rather than meeting them. He'd researched the local scene around him and realized the employee of a local legend, Big Rick Black's record shack, was the perfect assailant. Russel Hobbs, a former citizen of New York City, had his whole life changed after a stormy night with his friends ended in each of them being victims of a drive-by shooting, and all of their souls were absorbed into him, gaining each of their talents. He was shipped to his uncle's house in Britain for safety, only to end up in probably far, far worse hands. Unfortunately, Murdoc's search for a guitarist to steal ended up Holla Cracker, Tootie's old girlfriend, before, he failed at burglary. This time, neither getting a laugh nor a sentence, but instead another crack in his fragile nose. So the search was on to a competent walker that was searched far and wide, and only ended after a strange FedEx box filled with their fourth member. After all they endured, they were set to release their debut album. At first, I really, really hated this song. I don't know if it's odd time signature is the reason, or it's just honestly uncomfortable lyrics and delivery. I don't know if I'm supposed to find this song good, or I'm not sure what the mood really is. Honestly, it's like the auditory version of the Uncanny Valley. There's something undescribably unsettling about this song. It's like if the brown note didn't make you shit, but instead it just made you feel sick, which I genuinely do feel while listening to this song sometimes. But I'm pretty sure all these things are intentional, but I think it's just like when a show points out the continuity error or something, but it doesn't fix the problem just because it was intentional. But at the same time, I kind of do get the song. I kind of like it and fucking despise it at the same time. Like the verses in the beginning, I like them, and this line specifically, I really fucking hate. But also the premise is just essentially being some teeny brobby crap that the band created to lampoon is pretty cool, I guess. Like I said, it doesn't really make the song good. It's just like, yeah, you set out to make a bad song and you just kind of made one. But it's seriously been the bane of my Gorillaz experience. Do I hate it? Do I love it? I don't know. I don't know. Damon and Jamie. Damon Albarn, Jamie Hewlett. By the time he was 20, he was fluent on the guitar, piano, and violin side by side with his childhood friend, Graham Coxon, along with college friends Alex James and David Roundtree, who would form Blur. He studied in many prestigious schools, meaning many masters in figuring their work. While still in college, he'd create a personal fanzine called Man, which must have foreshadowed his career, as following college, he'd begin work for a newly minted magazine, Deadline. At first, they sucked at making money, at least. After completing their first albums, the only thing they gained was $60,000 worth of debt. But with the third album, they punched a hole into another world of possibilities. It became a huge hit, selling nearly 1 million copies and injecting them into the limelight of the Britpop wars. In Deadline, Hewlett would rather quickly strike gold with a strip called Tank Girl. Much of the strip was grimy, rude, and over-the-top, carrying many sentiments of the countercultural strikeback of Thatcherian politics. He would soon move out onto many projects, while still developing Tank Girl on the side, which, without much of his say, would be turned into a feature film. They seemingly lost these at the time. Anyone going against Oasis' first 2 albums would have a very hard time competing, but that wasn't what clearly irked Damon and his bandmates. After this, their fifth and their sixth was never the same. The second half of the 90s were not kind to Blur. Attempted suicide, drug addiction, depression, dissolution, and destroyed relationships were all these times. Even Oasis were struck in this rut. After 13, there was a medium hiatus for a band. Instead of a small seed was planted before all this came up. And this seed had grown much, much larger than what it now was. Although the film had much talent surrounding it, in the end it flopped hard, becoming a commercial and critical failure. Not too soon after this, the main magazine publishing title would also go under, with future projects being handled by people other than Jamie. While he was busy, creating other ships and projects, including a cartoon adaptation of a rock band. I fucking love this song so much, okay? The beat is so slick, something about this, acoustic bass is just so addictive to me, I just love the textures of the song. Really captures that certain mood. It really builds visions of massive psychedelic urban sprawl that also manages to be really calming, despite the imagery of the song is kind of foreboding and not really disturbing or creepy. It's a combination of calming and sinister. It's like you're being watched by vacant cameras in inner cities. Nobody's currently looking at you, but everything you do could be played back and could ruin your entire existence. With phrases like, "the digital won't let me go," or "don't think I'll be here too long," it's almost like a silent call for help. Like the world is powerless to change its misery and can only communicate its wants through small suggestions of doubt. Half of the entire point of Gorillaz is the animated band, but quite honestly, no matter how visual music is, it could never be better than a series or a movie, which isn't to say that they hadn't thought about that either. Multiple different ideas for a series were considered by Jamie, and he eventually decided the idea was crap and scrapped it, hoping that the animated music videos, illustrations, and interviews would suffice. But the biggest factor was seemingly more finance-based. They'd spent $20,000 on a minute-long acceptance speech of all the characters standing still. So they tried to combine short bursts of random activities and hope it turned out well, what's here is a pretty great idea. The writing is phenomenal, the dialogue is snappy, and all the time the animation is really charming. But honestly, I can't help but be underwhelmed. The fact that none of them clear more than 2 minutes is honestly such a drag. I really do wish that they were expanded into something bigger. Honestly, I take these as being animated like this one, 2D, and then interviews just so that they could be more known. And because the Gorillaz writing team, for how little they're used, are actually extremely talented. A lot of their dialogue is fucking hilarious. The first of the dub songs, once again, I really got to appreciate the atmosphere built. Although it's a common theme, the image of a torn down city, it's somehow remade fresh every time it features on the album. Conceptually, This Is Tomorrow Comes Today are nearly exact, but in execution, they're two very different songs, trading out a harmonica to strings. It's not actually a very huge leap though, and for my money, it's definitely a step down musically. Not to say that the song is bad, but honestly, the dub on their debut kind of display a flattened image of the genre. I'm not sure any of these would rank very highly on an actual ranking, but it is something to run home about when I'm able to say that about a track, and I still really enjoy it, Also, to me, this always sounded like, some sort of Bond theme. You know what I mean? Am I the only one? Yeah? Oh, okay. After retrieving all of his bandmates, the next step was to create and perform. So they got to work playing in local crowded shit-ass venue Camden Brown House. Starting a small riot in the venue just before Whiffy Smiffy himself realized their potential and let off multiple rounds from a shotgun into the air before begging Gorillaz to sign with him. After being very swiftly let into the industry to shuttle with the Beatles, Radiohead, and whoever the fuck Kylie Mignon is, thankfully Murdoc had expertly acquired a free former druid meeting point, goat clan worship spot, grave spot for the victim of the 1665 plague, orgy location, haunted orgy location, landfill site, Hell's Angels Clubhouse to record in. now known as Kong Studios, using a random assortment of objects to create noises and hopefully some songs, but by the end they were clearly too murky and downbeat and needed apparently fresh ears. So after replacing Murdoc's screechy trips with Dell's verses, the band, along with Dan the Animator, a producer, were sent to holiday to Jamaica, with the trip adding a buoyant optimism to the tracks. Suddenly, instead of being an hour of dirty British streets, it was shined by the golden lights of Jamaica. And after they'd all collectively gone through to get this to the point, they finally finished. There's certain musical segments that you could classify as gateway songs, and this is probably the weed or tobacco of Gorillaz' discography, okay? I feel like I even underestimate the popularity of this song. I mean, this shit was in the fucking Trolls movie, which just like, what? Like huh? Like the Trolls movie? Like what the, like how the, what? I think the fact that it was able to be so big while carrying the spirit of the rest of the album is phenomenal, because this song is really just a large rallying cry against consumerism and celebrity worship. You know, the main chorus paints 2D as, you know, the average MTV audience member watching TV slothfully, laying around his couch doing drugs and eating fast food while just absorbing the sights and sounds of his television. As to how it got so big, I think the quality is pretty clear. Specifically, the production of the song is actually insane. You know, it carries a lot of the grit of the rest of the album, while also providing a lot of the clarity I think it needs. The combination of the synths, the melodica, and the bass really provide a dirty texture sound and clean window through to the band's world at the same time. I used to really hate how long the outro went on, but it really does favorably showcase the entire mood of the song, with every instrument getting its chance to shine after Dell and Damon got their time. Speaking of which, the performances. You know, problem with certain newer and older Gorillaz songs is that sometimes the gimmick dissolves with Damon just using his normal voice and affectations. Like, and in the end, it just makes the song sound like a Blur extra track, but I bring this up because he dissolves completely into 2D within the song. Honestly, even without the video, I'd still imagine 2D singing every word in this song. Apparently, he had a cold while recording this, and I don't know, maybe he should have gotten colds all the time, because the difference it makes in his voice really, really works with the voice of 2D. Because there's kind of a distinction between 2D's talking voice and Damon's singing voice you only hear in some of the G-bites, but then it's just not present in the song.
Whoa, this is how you call Sweet Jerry alongside a man called Ed Case with the Gorillaz, the refix, you know, these.
For how much homage and intention this album places on its influences, to get a straight line of clear admiration must have been pretty crazy, you know, especially for something that was apparently organic, the Ed Case remix of Clint Eastwood. It's almost definitely another reason the original was so successful, with masters apparently being stolen and an initially unauthorized remix, which took over many clothes and undoubtedly added many members to the Gorillaz fan base, and as such a peach fuzz Brad taste in music says.
First heard this, I was like, what the hell is this garbage? Like, what are they doing to the song? Why are they speeding up deep, like 2D to make it this reggae style garbage dance remix? But then I started moving to it, man.
As if the album couldn't get more psychedelic, the bong hit at the beginning makes complete, like, perfect sense. You know, the song is almost designed as some obscure nightmare. You know, it has some of a chorus and verses, but through the looping drums, strings, horrific samples, it just shines through a random Japanese woman talking about the titular left-hand Suzuki method. This isn't something, you know, I'd listen to normally, but it's just, for like a complete acid trip, it's actually really fun to listen to. And also, to imagine what terrible imagery would follow in its wake. Anything would seem normal when compared to left-hand Suzuki method, but honestly, the theming of the song doesn't drag it down any bit. You know, really, the strings and horn on the song, along with the steady bass, is kind of soothing in a way, which is, you know, juxtaposed with the foreboding lyrics, which can create sort of uncanny valley, but like in a good way. You know, I really have less to say left-hand Suzuki method, but more so that I like this song, and the samples and the theming. It's good. It's a good song. I like this song. It's like Senator stole the line. Man, he starts clapper. I've just been very, very, very mixed on this song. You know, in the past, I used to really, really like it. Then I thought it was just all right. Then I thought it was pretty mediocre. But recently I've been enjoying the song more and more. I'm not sure why I've been so bipolar on it, but today I'd say that I do like the texture, the meaning, the atmosphere. It's just all pretty impeccable. You know, the fucking random nonsense lyrics I really do appreciate for being something I never would have come up with, but this decision I love nevertheless. You know, it's something that was probably an accident, or I don't know, maybe it's meant to represent the meaning of the world riding into random sentiments of nonsense or something, but I don't know. The whole thing is really inspired, I think, you know. The layered synths in the background and random robot noises sort of wrap you into this cyberpunk reality. I always imagined it as some huge bouncing cyborg generator machine, you know, endlessly jiggering its nonsense code into the world and enforcing its random sentiments on the universe. You know, the vocals mixed with the synths just make me think of some sort of brainless fusion of meat and computer. Also, I like how it sounds like Tootie is getting called a pussy, and he's like, no, it's like, pussy, no.
My entire journey with the band started in 2017, right when Humans was about to come out, and let's just say Humans wasn't exactly the best follow-up. But for whatever reason, I had pretty much just a very scattered interest in the albums. I didn't listen to full albums. I was just listening to their most popular songs, which maybe makes sense, who knows. I couldn't really keep myself invested in just straight music for as long as I can now, I guess. But eventually I started going in more and more and more, and as the Now Now came out and Song Machine and Cracker Island came out, I sort of lost an appreciation for the band. I'd sort of moved on to a certain other person that I made a couple videos on, whose name starts with a K, and also who does not really probably doesn't really enjoy Gorillaz very much, because Gorillaz definitely doesn't enjoy him. But I've expanded my taste far past Gorillaz. Does that really mean that I have to leave them behind? You know what I mean? So it's something I've been fighting with over the past year, is looking back at the band that made my taste what it really is, and made me who I really am. And I've tried to gain this new appreciation, which is really what this video is about. Originally, this was just going to be a normal ranking video, because I wanted to remake this other video I started disagreeing with. But at a certain point, I thought, how is this going to appear to me in another 2 years? Am I just going to want to remake the same video? So I took a different approach. I wanted to come back and really fully make something that I could be satisfied for the rest of my life with, in one way or another. And I hope I've sufficed.
On reflection, I'm not really sure about the song. It definitely desperately needed some extra time in the oven. For what it is, I really enjoy it. I mean, the chorus and everything works fine enough, but honestly, with the song, there's a very thin line on atmosphere and aesthetics, which is to say, if you were to patronizingly describe punk music to someone else you never spoke to, your language, I think this is what it would sound like, you know what I mean? There's pretty much nothing here to be analyzed or thought more of. It just feels like most of the basic aspects of punk music dissolve into pace and fade back into your ears like cows. And just like those cows, I can feel the holes forming into my fucking brain. I can feel myself fucking getting prions. But I think the pacing also really hurts the song. For the intro of the segment, I used American Idiot by Green Day because the structure is almost the exact same. But funny thing about the song, the pacing, I think, is one of the best parts of that song. And punk shows how it could definitely be messed up. I think the way it stops and starts really hurts how the song sounds. And it's kind of nauseating in a way. I mean, maybe it's because when I wrote this, I ate way too much bacon and wanted to die, but I don't know. Who knows? Initially, Gorillaz was kind of a flop in Japan, which sounds wrong. Like, maybe they should have been huge, like way bigger than anywhere else in the world, especially in hindsight with how big Vocaloids are. So, they got together a collection of B-sides, not unlike regular industry packages, but in the hopes of gathering a Japanese audience. So here we go, wake the fuck up, lightning round. Here are the first, just a lot of first impressions because a lot of these I haven't heard. Soul Child. With the original is pretty laid back and almost a stoner anthem. Like this raises the energy. And can I say this? Maybe spoilers, but I like this way more than the original. It's kind of weird to include two different 2000 dance remixes, but this clearly has a much bigger house inspiration and to me sounds very reminiscent of Daft Punk's Homework. But I don't know, maybe I have a Daft Punk bias. Actually, I think it's more like human after all, because a few sections go on for a little while, which, I mean, it's house, I know, but maybe you could have cut down a little bit. Why the fuck was this not on the album? Seriously, what? I wish I knew of the song's existence. It really sounds like an alternate 9/11, which was made after, so I don't know, maybe this was made after too. Like, seriously, I feel like you could definitely switch this out for some of the songs and self-titled to better effect, because this song is pretty full release worthy. You know, layer production and overall sound really makes it like a perfect completed work that would have been reworked further. And also, let's literally just rock the house bass line. I'm more of the Buggles new wave guy than the Cure new wave guy, but seriously, you know, the more passion, emotional delivery of the song is incredible. You know, it just sounds like venturing deep into the earth as a gigantic staglet lights and glistening jewels in view. Also, I swear to God, that synth is literally just the one used just like Heaven by The Cure, even though the cover by Goldfingers is way better, way better. There's a couple things holding this version down, like with the outro being really weirdly long, and the live drums sounding a bit weird at places, along with a whole bunch of other random noises that for some reason sound significantly worse than the rest. You know, I think it could be really interesting if they made some sort of ultimate version with some of the verses and extra production of this with Dell. But the original has such excellent pacing, and maybe that version would be too long. Still, there are so many ideas presented here that I really love. Officially the first recorded Gorillaz song, I can see why this was left off the album, actually. It's funny seeing, you know, the differences in what they originally conceptualized and what would be the final product. You know, there's part of this song that I could really only call animated. I think ever since I heard about this song, I've been slowly drifting away from it. You know, it has the same problems as Rehash. The chorus is just kind of nothing, you know, it's like quirky or whatever, but I think it just takes way too much of the song, and maybe it could be shortened to a bridge while the real chorus takes place, because it's just so fucking long. The actual song is kind of short, with, you know, most of the runtime being taken up by this one section. The 2D parts are fine, and I do enjoy the simplistic beat, but honestly, the scat is kind of annoying. You know, there's a lot of elements to the song that become pretty grating over time, so the song becomes a game between, you know, waiting for the bad parts and waiting through the good ones. The concept of zombie hip-hop on subtitles revisit a topic, but just like the dub, thankfully they reinvent the style most of the time, and it comes out fresh. This is including the angle of trying to emphasize with the creatures that by concept are made to be inhuman. It's actually kind of clever. You know, 2D relates to their struggles. You know, something again I love is the atmosphere. You know, with all like the random samples surrounding you and the nice guitar comforting every step, like the limp undead slowly treading through the landscape, looking for a reprieve of its environment. The slow build-up of weird country-sounding aspects and soft nature of the song sound pretty well, like remarkably well. You know, I wouldn't have objected to this being on the album. Just for what it is, it's pretty nice musically, and it's really developed. Maybe the lyrics could be a little more varied, but that hasn't really stopped it before, so I don't know. What's interesting is that he's doing the funny voice again, so this truly does sound exactly like 2D singing. You know, Damon does dissolve into the character again, which he doesn't do for a lot of Gorillaz songs, especially as you go more and more and more. And also, if you think I missed one, we're going to be talking about that one for a little later. The next of the large dub segment of the album, the real star of the show, is the atmosphere. Something about the way the record scratches and nature noises and strings combine turns the song into an almost magical, witchy mood out in the middle of the forest being consumed by machine, and in the foreboding orchestras of dread. Their lyrics about gravity and the universe also help to achieve this goal. You know, the wide, dark universe consumed by the wills of gravity and other forces that weren't understood by humanity for a while calls into question what else might be out there into the night, in a forest or in the galaxy that might also currently elude the human spirit, but will one day be so regularly understood that nearly all people alive are aware of its existence. The main line of gravity will never let me down, and it's actually kind of reassuring that whatever is out there or inside of us will be good, or at least not harmful, for a while. Gravity will never let you down. People let you down, not gravity. After releasing their first and hopefully long line of albums, with Noodle and Russel going back to the UK to search for a director, which came rather quickly, Paulo Scanbasio, a prolific film director who was adamant on becoming the first to work with Gorillaz. But nothing went to plan, and after a long line of failed concepts, it became clear that Scanbasio's claim to fame wasn't legitimate. So, by the recommendation of their close friend Damon Albarn, they then hired Jamie Hewlett and began work on Tomorrow Comes Today music video. Soon afterwards, they'd be interviewed in Dazed and Confused. Apparently the point was made through the music, with Dan Norton and their interviewee giving a rousing reception to Gorillaz' actual discography. But what happened next would blow each of their minds out of the water. The Clint Eastwood video is what would propel the band into superstardom. With it only taking 16 weeks, the results speak for themselves. But most of the reason those results resulted in results was the happy accident of the actual shoot itself. Originally, it was only supposed to take place in the scenic Hong Kong graveyard. It became clear that they were about to accidentally stumble across gold with a rolling thunderstorm possession and dancing gorillas attacking them. Of course, the fiery, amazing video would explode into an equal reaction, immediately blowing up the band past their wildest dreams, reaching number 3, which was much harder when the radio ruled the airways and when people actually bought music. This began what can only be described as an American takeover, as they expanded their work into the alien nation and became a first semblance of a tour by first doing their first set in the first shows in London, by projecting themselves behind a large monitor which showed other random assortments of pictures, then Paris and Dublin giving equal admiration towards the band, and then the US with an initially paltry sales of 25,000, slowly rising to 75,000. Apparently, it was still not enough. In fact, it would have eventually surpassed 200,000 copies in at least 13 cases of heat-exhausted children dressing up in gorilla costumes, waiting for autographs and overwhelming admiration. But it wasn't just America that loved Gorillaz. It said after their run of videos and venues, Self-Titled would eventually sell about 6 million copies and begin the band into another phase of their careers. The next phase of their careers. The second phase of their careers. The next phase of their career. I'm not sure if this is the first time I listened to this album and if I thought most of this track, but today I cannot get enough of it. Okay, there's something about the sly howls of these basses and their sonar technology, along with the subsisted drums and generally small energy the song gives off. The whole thing is just a really soothing experiment with the actual imagery of the song. It's pretty abstract and laid back as it just slowly lays you into all I can imagine, soft geometric shapes, wandering an endless expanse of darkness, looking for their place and attempting to stick to it. As to what the quote in the middle means, I'm not sure, but the actual track itself is quite solid. It's definitely one of my favorites, and it doesn't need quantity or anything technically to set it apart, especially if it is just, about anxiety and trying to remain calm. Covering the tie between Damon and Hewlett creating Gorillaz' debut and some other trash album no one likes. Honestly, I was expecting a little bit more out of this. Most documentaries, random fights or moments between Damon, and I know it's part of the appeal, but at the same time, there's only a small amount covered for the development of the real album, and most of the scenes take place after the debut has already been released. Other than small moments with Latin Simone, there's not actually that much development of the music being made. I'd give this 2 out of 5 Dunko points. This is another song that I've frankly underrated. The beat is pretty minimalist with only 9 elements in the entire fucking song, but what is there works really well. The decision not to include 2D in the track, I think, is the right one, despite being hated by its actual creators. Now, there's nothing that needs to be added into the song either. It definitely does sound completed. In 1997, all of these stones were set into place. Both Hewlett and Albarn were at the end of long relationships and tired, being burned out by the industries that they were both a part of. Both enjoyed watching and lampooning what they saw as man-in-tone, dreadful television. a dangerous and perfect mix for the hatred of all things celebrity and bland. So obviously, they wanted to do something about it. After they finally had their concept, it was time to begin creating their vision. Gorillaz was born. Damon began working on the album itself. Obviously, at this point, it had no name or concept, but he was still able to create, and create he did. As production of the album went along, he noticeably stalling at about the 60% mark. At this point, Damon was running low on ideas and brought in bassist Junior Dan and Dan McNamara, or Dan the Automator. Obviously, to a large delay. However, Jamie started sketching almost after they had the concept. He'd throw away most of this early work and redesign their world a couple of times, going through characters and design which wouldn't see the light of day. A 17-year-old Asian girl on the guitar, an actual gorilla playing bongos with the band, though at a certain point, it was clear he'd finally come up with something good enough. Although things were seemingly going smoothly, much of the friction in the creation of the album came about, with people being confused about the concept of the band. Despite their prior works, it was still hard for each of them to find interviews or anyone to take them seriously. Still, March 26th, the album released, and obviously it was a big hit, and with the Clint Eastwood video being a large springboard towards that. Hewlett was busy working hard on the new G-Bites, which had been taking place of some of the ideas that they had for a TV show, which was a reoccurring desire for him even way past these years. I think ever since I heard about this song, I've been slowly drifting away from it. You know, it has the same problems as Rehash. The chorus is just kind of nothing. You know, it's like quirky or whatever, but I think it just takes way too much of the song, and maybe it could be shortened to a bridge while the real chorus takes place, because it's just so fucking long. The actual song is kind of short, with, you know, most of the runtime being taken up by this one section. The 2D parts are fine, and I do enjoy the simplistic beat, but honestly, the scat is kind of annoying. You know, there's a lot of elements of the song that become pretty grating over time, so the song becomes a game between, you know, waiting for the bad parts and waiting through the good ones. Supposedly created after a group of ex-Soviet space monkeys stole the masters for the Gorillaz debut, the album Laika Come Home is a reggae dub remix of self-titled. And although the actual music itself is as you expect, you know, grimy, rainy, a little bit of sunshine, but usually sluggish for what it is, it's kind of cool. Back again with fucking 2000 remixes out of this. This is definitely the worst. Extending the cool shoe shine segment just makes the song so much of a fucking slog. There's nothing wrong with the tempo being slow, and maybe it'd be nice and relaxing if you're in that mood. It's just like, ugh. The rusty, crusty, dusty mood that Slow Country gives off is accentuated and actually fits the remix. They gave it quite a lot. And I enjoy the horns and distant 2D vocals. You know, the whole thing gives off a misty, mysterious atmosphere. And, you know, I love it for that. Stripping down an already stripped down track might take this as another slow exercise, if it will. But instead, the menacing atmosphere of TCT is just another further, and the extra production in the background gives an almost underwater feel. Honestly, it's like a slow trek to an empty street at night, and I like how it sounds. And most of those moments in the song where the bottom falls out and you're just left with a bunch of swirling instruments, but Banana Baby has no floor. It's falling out right before the song has even begun. And also with the title Banana Baby, banana, mañana, tomorrow comes today, mañana comes today, mañana baby, banana baby. Oh yeah, okay, am I stupid? Is this fucking intentional? It's Banana Baby. Definitely the most psychedelic, yet the most random screeches and 2D noises of man research thrown into a meat grinder and turned into a cyborg abomination subjected to more heavy machinery. At least that's what I hear. But still, the mystery meat culmination of vocals is just so fucking awesome. It's such an awesome choice, and the instrumental strikes fucking gold. The grime on display is fucking palpable. If Monkey Racket was the perfect display of instrumental, Depunked would be the best example of what to avoid. It's slow, it's methodical, it's nothing seriously. This whole song is just waiting for the song to finish. What's there is pretty generic to the rest of the album. I think it just needed some extra sauce to differentiate it from the rest of the album. Like just having that little bit near the end to have more of a presence by cutting down the first beat. Maybe they could switch between one another. Just something. The more funk-inspired themes of this one actually serve quite a lot of brevity to the rest of the album. If I were to describe you what this sound like, it would be nothing like that. But the extra sunshine added does give a hint of spice to the song, making it feel a lot more bouncy and lighthearted compared to the rest of the track list. Self-titled really proves its worth, with Starshine being a pretty obvious addition to the dub format. Funnily enough, compared to many other tracks on this album, not much has actually changed in this transition, just a few minor ones, but overall presence of the Starshine is very, very obvious and still shines through. I've asked the question of why certain decisions and mood and length were made on this project before, but Crooked Dumb is definitely the shiny example of this question. The song just is nothing, or very little at the very least. It's just extending the sample of 2D's vocals is really cool, but the rest of the song is not as inventive as that, and mostly just flounders around, wandering in aimless directions, adding a lot of the bounce some prior tracks added in the muddy atmosphere, offered here. Is much different than the rest of the album. The string-heavy original is refurbished with the drum machine, bass, and synth, which are definitely good substitutes, and I love the sunnier mood that it gives off, the faster tempo it offers, and some well-needed brevity. The album lays back a little bit, extending the little kid playing outro part of Rehash and adding lively horns. It again does add brevity and cut through the noise. It's a little bit of fun to add to the track list, and I enjoy it well enough, but again, could definitely be shortened. But also, I like how they played random different clips of 2D's verse on Rehash in what I think are leftover Noodle background vocals. Mostly a low humming noise with random elements of Clint Eastwood popping in and out. Fistful of Peanuts displays a lot of the problems I have with this project in this song. It's specific. It has the least to offer. Really what I would describe as the song is just 5.5 minutes of I suppose it could be nice to have in the background, but I don't know. The album kind of ends with a bang. I don't think this is my favorite song on the album, but it actually quite nice. Turning M1A1 into this, I don't think was very easy. I'm pretty sure this one noise comes from the beginning of Dawn of the Dead clip, which is pretty fucking cool. Just, us all around. The instruments is rather nice, and the horns are very good to listen to with the ears. Pitting them against each other, I think, goes something like this, okay? So, from best to worst, A Fistful of Peanuts, Depunked, Jungle Fresh, Come Again, P45, Strictly Rubber Dub, Crooked Dub, Dub 09, Banana Baby, Little Dub Sheffin, Mutant Genius, and Monkey Racket. For a while, if you visited Gorillaz.com, you could explore Kong Studios and do a bunch of shit. Unfortunately, all this work was pretty much thrown out, and by the looks of it, there was tons and tons of stuff to do. And honestly, it's pretty weird that their 20th anniversary, they didn't revive the site or do anything like that. And what I think bringing it back, maybe phase 2 or 3, or maybe it could be a new one. That'd be amazing. But the actual site itself consisted of touring around Kong, the band's rooms, hallways, the back ends, the studio theater, and other random rooms to play games, talk, draw. Just a whole ton of shit was sacrificed. For further research, look at this video. Look at it. Are you looking at the video? Although Damon and Jamie were never given to the credit as the creators of Gorillaz, but it really does go much further than that. Obviously the main four are the true creators. So one day they were fed up with Damon and Jamie comparable fame and decided to jump them. So the two started going insane in fear of the band returning. They tried a myriad of things to escape them, right as the news reporter goes on the hunt to find the two and interview them. All the antics surrounding Jamie and Damon are actually really funny, and honestly, the whole thing is pretty creative, but I enjoy the theme most. Gorillaz is not a one-man or two-man band. Instead, it's Jamie's own words. There's be 200 silhouettes of it instead of just them. Obviously they couldn't do it all without others. They couldn't even make the statement without the writing and editing talents of others, which does actually dive into the reason Gorillaz exists. Removing the ego behind artists and trying to let them breathe on their own. Gorillaz' debut was released in 2001, which, if you didn't know it, was a pretty tumultuous event. September 11th, which Gorillaz, along with D12, without Eminem, responded back to the tourists with a heart-wrenching, spirit-rending track about love, loss, and the different emotions felt on that fateful day. Okay, so the actual song itself is mostly just set dressed by 9/11, and there's very few tiny connections. Either way, the actual song itself is actually very good. I enjoy the energy, each of the members give off, and they actually flow right off the chorus very, very well. It should be noted that the original is not on streaming service, but there is a live version, which is better. Genuinely, the live version is better. The energy and more organic instrumentation add a ton to the track and makes the definitive version. Either way, it's kind of weird, but apparently the 4 members of the band had a good time with D12, excluding Murdoc, whom spent most of the recording session doped up on a cocktail of rapper alcohol and Dr. Pepper while riding a scooter at 11 miles an hour. Definitely one of the darkest Gorillaz songs, even just subject-wise. But really, the best part is the production and texture, not just offered in the instrumentals, but the vocals too. Most of the time I listen to the 2D version, but the original deserves its flowers too. Ibrahim Ferrer was the exact right choice to add some extra flavor to the song. And his Spanish vocals definitely reach past the language barrier to be really beautiful, even a language I don't really speak. But even in the 2D version, the equally beautiful instrumentation still shines through. The horns and strings and pianos combined to paint a really grim outlook. Also 2D's vocals might be a little too on the nose, like when he just says, "give up." Sometimes I start laughing because he's like, "give up," Also, even though the vocals about suicide on 5/4 come off as cringy or uncomfortable, they don't really bother me on this song. I think they just come off way more genuine or earned. Man, I have not appreciated the song enough. The minimalism and atmosphere is just truly immaculate. The grime able to be displayed in such a spare composition is impressive. Before I've kind of derided the vocals, but as I've just gained Stockholm Syndrome and now love them, I think the way that they echo and spread across an infinite expanse is just really interesting, especially when included in the presence of other elements. It's interesting how a song can be both spacey and confined at the same time. It's like in a huge black cave only lightened by a clear view of the sky. But also, I can never listen to this song without thinking about the Xbox arcade game called I Made a Game with Zombies in it. And after looking at this, there's not really a specific part that sounds like it. So the song, I guess I just made a connection between those two a long time ago. And it's just followed me for the rest of the time that I listen to the song. Because there's a part in the game where it sounds like it, I guess, a little bit. But I fucking gaslit myself. I gaslit and girl bossed myself into imagining somehow that they're the exact same. Even though they're definitely not.
Right, whoever's got my other 2 bracelets, give them back to me, otherwise I'm not doing no more music tonight, okay? Period. Unless they're on that stage in fucking two minutes, I'm not going to do anything else fucking ever again in Spain, so I want them back now.
It's the music that we choose. 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 It's the music that we choose.
After the release and success of the album, a North American tour went underway. Their first show, unfortunately, didn't start out with a bang. On a touchdown, Murdoc was arrested for a crime long set in his past, and in the end, he only narrowly made it to the first show in Toronto. But The problems didn't stop there. With setup issues and the crowd criticism, the tour was unfortunately off to a very, very bad start. Their journey was mostly smooth sailings after that. The rest of the tour, with the bus nicknamed the Charon after the boat that took the dead to Hades, became notorious for its stench and nightlife. Murdoc summoned demons, exploded eggs in microwaves, and shaved and housed large griffins until their tour manager, Colonel Duffy, quit as to avoid the stress of being caused. As the tour crossed NYC, Russel was having a good time revisiting his past with his new hope in his life for a real beginning. However, Noodle was having the exact opposite, being stirred by inner turmoil of her gaining flashbacks of her previous life, with Tootie slowly becoming more annoyed by Murdoc's antics. As shows passed, the four came closer into their roles, yet got more cutthroat. By the end, their brains were scrambled, tempers were high, and a passing comment Murdoc made about getting bigger than Satan seemed to start biting them, as their last show of a festival in Mexico would become a disaster, with a massive crowd of 60,000, intense heat raging the venue, multiple tigers attempting to ride off into the sunset on motorcycles, a rowdy crowd with a chronic penchant for puking everywhere, and toppling over a massive part of the stage, which was sent a huge monkey head prop flying into their fellow concert goers. The set was a horrible disaster each of the bandmates weren't safe from. With Murdoc entering covered in vomit, Russel collapsing and only coming to after becoming injected with hard drugs, Noodle having recurring nightmares and visions of her apparent past life, and Tootie becoming fully cognizant of the horrible display happenings around him. The entire concert was a massive, unadulterated flop. They thankfully were able to keep mostly under the wraps, but they wouldn't come out unscathed, now being seen as the kind of thing they'd hate, a bunch of cocky rock stars too concerned with themselves. With the tour over and hopes for their luck returning, they'd set their eyes on making a movie. Though the four of them had bought a house in the City of Angels, the decision wasn't unanimous. Russell felt that returning to Kong and creating more music was the better option, and Noodle's visions and images were giving her a strong urge to investigate. Murdoc insisted as to stay in their new home and search for a well-enough director, though there was a large delay towards his goal. Most of the time, the four of them were instead partying and procrastinating rather than actively searching, though opportunities came, practically renting out a hotel, room 103, with supplies lasting a month. Hopes were high on the success of the idea. Instead, a monster was created. Rumors abound about the horrible debauchery going on behind the door of room 103, as the band ran in circles, coming with dead-end, aimless ideas, torturing themselves with boredom. Eventually, tempers broke after 2D finally pressed on Murdoc's fast lerp. As he lunged and effectively tackled 2D on the floor, strangling him, Russell and Noodle tried their hardest to get the Green Man off of his bandmate, and he eventually conceded, launching a hateful speech towards the innocent little man about how much he hated him and the rest of them. As Murdoc stormed out of the hotel, it was clear that there was no normal argument. Even as the day passed, Murdoc was adamant on his decision. Although they all owned their LA house collectively, he'd be gone towards his own destiny, flowing into Mexico to get as far away from 2D as possible, but also to enjoy the sunny fruits of his labor in peace. And back in LA, the rest of them decided to also split ways. Noodle had disappeared the same night as Murdoc, secretly flying to Japan on a mission to recover her past. 2D and Russell lived together in their new mansion, but Russell was closed off and acting strange, which led 2D to become entrenched into the LA nightlife, hanging around much of the clientele until he too became bored of them and decided to return to his homeland, the UK. Him and his father reconnected with his roots, but he left Russell all alone, with his mind being racked and destroyed by the odd things going on around him, as he had no one else to seek refuge. Even though they'd contacted him before, now it was all gone. It was all done. It was all over. In 4 separate countries and 3 separate continents, it became obvious that Gorillaz was done. This song in specific is a special case where I like it much more now than when I first heard it. When I first heard it, I really enjoyed it too, but I guess I doubly enjoy the song now. I think the incongruence between the elements of the song, the harsh wind synth playing throughout the low soft bass, the odd cyborg drum, acoustic drum machine noises, the nice flavored pianos and the playful scratchy synth prefaced in the chorus. There's really a nice wide range of sounds and expectations that you see throughout a small amount of time. to me, sometimes there becomes a point in a song where it becomes less of an experience and more of a formula, and I don't really enjoy that listen because, I've memorized every little bit of instrumental, but that's definitely not what happened to any of these songs in this album. But I think Slow Country has especially avoided this problem. For whatever reason, I used to always hate the outro on Clint Eastwood, and I used to hate the intro on here too. It can be kind of annoying if I can't reach my phone, but the atmosphere it builds is pretty cool, honestly. The sample of Dawn of the Dead and the building's dreaded guitars perfectly demonstrate the panic and terror needed, and then after such a long delay, it's only fitting for it all to spit out all at once, With the rest of the song being dedicated to being just a complete burst of energy, sending shit out everywhere, I've heard it being boiled down to an annoying noise rock, but to me it feels really, really sincere. Honestly, the long intro lets you soak in the journey you just went on, and the rest of the song is a great exploration to sit beside it. Really, the song perfectly encapsulates the entire feel of the album. With just the slow, methodical intro and the noisy punk outro. Really, if they just expanded the intro and made it to like a dub song, it could have been used as a summary of the album if you didn't want to sit through the rest of it. Which, in my opinion, is what makes an ending perfect. Okay, so this is from worst to best. 5-4. Man Research, Clapper. Left Hand Suzuki Method, Punk. New Genius, 19-2000. Soundcheck, Dracula. Starshine, Rehash, Rock the House, Latin Simone.
Double Bass.
Slow Country, Clint Eastwood, M1A1, and Tomorrow Comes Today.
Even though Gorillaz made much more music that I enjoy after this, there's nothing really like Phase 1. There's nothing really like these moody atmospheric songs. There's nothing really like Laika Come Home. There's nothing like the Ed Case remix of Clint Eastwood. There's nothing like the bonus tracks. There's nothing like G-sides. Because there's nothing like this album. But there are things that come after this album. There are a lot of things that come after this album. So why leave it here? Why leave my further understanding of the band here? I don't know. But But one thing that I do know is that I love Phase 1. I love Celebrity Takedown.